5 loaves of bread, 2 fish. That's what they had. But there were also 5,000 men, which means the total crowd, including women and children, could have been 15 to 20,000 people. And all they had was one boy's lunch. The disciples do the math and they come back with an obvious answer. This isn't going to work. Not even 8 months of wages could feed this crowd. And Jesus says, have everyone sit down. And then what happens next is the only miracle that is found in all 4 Gospels. But John tells the story much different than the way the others do. This scene takes place on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. Imagine open hillsides, green grass, springtime. And John tells us that it's near the Passover, and that's important. It's there for a reason. And in John's version of this story, Philip and Andrew are specifically named. And I think that they're specifically named because John teaches us a different lesson than the other 3 disciples. So Jesus' popularity has been growing. Great crowds have started to follow him. In this particular instance, he crosses over to the far side of the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd follows him. They've been watching the signs that he's been doing. They've been watching the miracles. Maybe some of them there wanted a miracle as well. And the crowds just keep getting bigger and bigger. So he goes up on this hillside and he sits down with his disciples. And John tells us something that the other Gospels don't. It says that Jesus looked up and saw the crowds coming. And he turns to Philip and he asks, where are we going to buy bread for all these people? And then John steps back into the story to tell us that Jesus already knew what he wanted to do and that he was testing Philip. And this detail that he's testing Philip is very important because this test is not about logistics. It's an invitation to faith. So Philip runs the numbers. 8 months' wages wouldn't be enough to feed all these people, to provide them with meals. So the math doesn't work. But then Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, he comes up with something and he says, hey, I found this boy's lunch, 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. And then Andrew says what might be the most honest thing in this whole story. He says, but what are these among so many? And I don't think this is pessimism. I think it's just reality. He's simply stating fact. Andrew found the only food available and immediately recognized that it wasn't going to be enough. Jesus says, have the people sit down. There's plenty of room, probably plenty of grass. John notes that it's spring, it's near Passover. So 20,000 people settle in to this green hillside by the sea for lunch. Jesus takes the loaves, he gives thanks. He has the disciples distribute the bread and the fish among the people. And John says simply, they had as much as they wanted. Then when everyone is eaten, Jesus tells them to gather what's left over. And I think that's an important point as well. I mean, why didn't he just distribute it and let them have their fill and let them worry about the leftovers? But he asked them to gather what was left over. And as we know, they collect 12 baskets. 12 baskets left over from 5 loaves and 2 small fishes. So it started as a boy's small lunch, ended with the leftovers filling 12 baskets. And of course the crowd saw what happened. And so they start making plans to take Jesus by force and make him a king. Jesus knows exactly what they're doing, what they want to do. So he slips away, withdraws alone, to be alone, because he came to feed them, not to be crowned. So I think 3 things are important in this story today. First, Jesus already knew what he was going to do. And I think that one sentence changes the entire tone of the story. That's why I said this is much different than the rest of the Gospels. And to be honest, I've taught this before. You've heard this before in sermons and in Bible studies. But did we ever catch that line? Jesus already knew what he was going to do. I mean, that one sentence changes the whole story. That question to Philip was not confusion or desperation. It was a setup. Jesus looked at this impossible situation. He wasn't worried. He wasn't discouraged. He was teaching. Philip answered the math, but Andrew answered in a way that is pretty amazing. Andrew answered with what he could find, and then he immediately questioned if it was enough. I mean, both responses are honest and completely reasonable in the situation. But Jesus uses them both as the raw material for this lesson that he is teaching them and ultimately teaching us today. That lesson is that this should not have been possible, but it happened. And second, I think there's a connection that we miss that John points out, that I've missed for years, is that he tells us twice that this happened near the Passover. The Passover was the defining moment in Jewish identity. It's the night that God fed his people and freed them from slavery. God promised manna in the wilderness. Moses distributed it. And so Jesus feeding this 20,000 plus or minus people on this hillside near the Passover with bread, I think John is drawing this line to the Exodus. And I think what he's trying to tell us is that this is a new Exodus and that there is a new Moses, except greater than Moses, because Moses only distributed the manna that God provided. But Jesus is both the provider and the distributor. And the crowd gets close to the right answer. I mean, they call him a prophet. They understand that this was prophesized. They kind of had who he was a little bit wrong. And they draw the wrong conclusion. They think that he's a political king. But Jesus came to be something that the word king doesn't even begin to cover. And number 3, the 12 baskets. You've probably heard this before. There were started with 5 loaves, became 12 baskets. And I think the points are that Jesus did not just meet the need, he exceeded the need, which is wonderful. He gives them as much as they wanted, but there are 12 baskets left over. And like I said, the point of picking up the baskets and the fact that the number 12 is there is important. We know that it's symbolic. We know that there are 12 tribes of Israel. There are 12 disciples, 12 apostles, you could say. There's abundance, but there's no waste. I mean, Jesus did that on purpose to prove a point to them. So I want to go back to Andrew's question, something that stuck out at me this time. And that question is, but what are these among so many? I mean, a lot of us have been in that position. We see the need clearly, the size, the weight, the ramifications, and you see what you have available, but the math doesn't math. It just doesn't work. And what you have to solve the problem available to you is not enough, not even close. So Andrew brought what he had anyway. He found the boy, he found the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and he brought them to Jesus with a question that probably was more of a confession. I don't think this is enough, but here it is. And that might be the most faithful thing anyone does or says in this whole story. And that is bringing what is clearly not enough, but handing it over anyway. I mean, Jesus already knew what he was going to do. John tells us that. He knows what he's going to do with what you are bringing to him. And the question is not whether it's enough. It never was. The question is whether or not you will hand it over to Jesus. Think about that. What's holding you back? What's stopping you? It's because we think we're not good enough. We think that we can't solve this problem because we're not enough. We don't have enough. Jesus already knows that. He just wants you to bring it to him. He just wants to know if you'll give him the problem to handle. He just wants to know if you're willing to let him take it. So what is it you're holding on to today that you need to give Jesus and let him handle it? And maybe he'll take care of it and there'll be enough left over to share. Grace and peace to you. God bless you. Have a great week.